Welcome everyone to the New Year 2023. My name is Noemi, lead pastor here at Joy Church with our vision to connect people to God. We are so excited to kick off our brand new series entitled The 66 Books of the Bible. We will be talking about creation to Christ. I know that this may be boring or overwhelming to some of you because of its detailedness, but our hope is to make it creative in telling these stories that surround the entirety of the Bible. Are you ready? You can grab a pen and paper to write things down that will help you later as we delve in the scriptures. We do have the whole year to look into the depths of God's love despite the cruelty of mankind to one another as we unravel these love letters written from different people who were inspired by the Holy Spirit. I'm so glad to say that this year we have guest pastors together with the volunteer staff leaders and young adults from Joy Church to participate in teaching us each book every weekend. Thank you all. If you are one of the young people who will be participating in teaching, know that we are here to guide you in this process and help to harness your skills in preaching or teaching, and at the same time learn what the Bible has to say to you and share this with people who are listening. If you are a parent of these young kids, we thank you for your support. Let's begin this journey together. A little bit of overview of the Bible. It is divided into two sections. The Old has 39 books and the New Testament has 27 books with a total of 66 books. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. We have the Pentateuch that comprises the first 5 books of the Old Testament, namely Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Tradition credits Moses as the author of Genesis as well as the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and most of Deuteronomy. However, modern scholars, especially from the 19th century onward, place the book's authorship in the 6th and 5th century BC, hundreds of years after Moses is supposed to have lived. Genesis has 50 chapters, and I will be dividing this into 2 parts, Genesis 1 to 11 and Genesis 12 to 50. It is important to listen to names, places, and sequence of events that's happening in order to get a clearer view of God's redemptive plan for humanity. The first part is about God and the whole world, and part 2 is about Abraham and his descendants. Most of us are familiar with God's creation story. In the beginning, God took away the darkness and disorder by creating heaven and earth and the living beings to bring out its order and beauty. Then he made the humans in his image to rule the world, in the Hebrew name Adam, which has to do with their purpose and role in God's world. He is to be the reflection of God's character, representative of God's rule. God blesses the humans by creating a garden. Humans have a free choice on how to go about building this world, God's world. The question is, will humans trust God in the definition of good and evil? Or should they explore what is good and evil for themselves? Let's continue on. Rebel against God is to embrace death because you are turning away from the giver of life himself. That is represented by the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Chapter 3, God created all living things. A mysterious creature in the form of a snake enters into this story with no introduction. However, he is a creature in rebellion against God that wants to lead humans in rebellion as well. Rebel against God is not to embrace death, but will have life and be like God as the snake influenced Adam and Eve. Remember, I mentioned earlier that humans were created in the image of God, and all that they have to do is trust God. But in this instance, humans choose autonomy and the knowledge of good and evil This then led to human casualty. Man and woman became vulnerable from each other. So they covered themselves as with clothes and hid from one another because they couldn't trust themselves or each other. Intimacy from God was lost. So they run and hide from God. Although the snake had his victory, it is destined for defeat. One day, a descendant will come from a woman and hit a strike on its head, and the snake will strike back at the descendant's heel as well. This is a mysterious promise of this wounded victor. Some of you are familiar with this verse, Genesis 3:15. You know, God's grace abounds even when men rebelled against Him, yet God promised to rescue them. But this did not erase the consequences of the human's decision, leading to their grief and finally death. This had a ripple effect, as shown in chapters 4 to 11. Results of rebellion from God were found in the stories in this book. Chapter 4, Cain and Abel's story. For most are familiar. Cain was jealous of his brother and wanted to murder him. But God reminded him not to give in to temptation. But he does it anyway and killed his own brother. Cain then builds a city where violence and oppression reigns. Here we will find Lamech had more than one wife, and he is even more violent than Cain was. After this, in chapter 6, an odd story about sons of God refers to evil angelic beings or kings who have claimed they are descended from the gods. Evil angels or kings claim divine descendants, have many wives, and these warriors are called the Nephilim in Hebrew term. They are mysterious beings or people in the Hebrew Bible who are large and strong. The point is that people are building a kingdom that fills God's world with violence and more corruption. What's the response of God? Grief because humanity is ruining the world and each other, and because of His passion to protect the world, He washes humanity clean in a great flood, but He protects. Chapter 6 to 9, another familiar story, Noah and his descendants. One blameless man whom God commissions as the second Adam together with his family. Rescue and repeats blessings. God gives His divine blessing and commission to him to go out to the world. Noah fails again, and one of his sons named Ham does something shameful. He is now naked. Adam is ashamed, just like the first Adam, leading to the foundation of Babylon, the city. They had a new technology, the brick, that would build cities and towers faster than ever before. These people would like to make great names for themselves through building towers that would reach out high onto the gods. God's image once again, rebellion and corruption and violence. A garden of rebellion at large. This spread so God humbled them and scattered the people. The diverse stories have shown that God is so gracious by giving another chance for people. But humanity fails, and that all have contributed to this world of destruction God created to be beautiful. Part 2 is God and Abraham's family. The question is, what will God do next to rescue and redeem the people? In chapter 12, God opens a whole new story. After people scattered from Babylon, the author traced one family, and that is Abram, later known as Abraham. In chapter 12, God calls him to leave his family and go to the land of Canaan. God promised that Abraham will become the great nation with a great name and to bless him. Remember that Babylon wants to create a great name for themselves, but God bestows upon Abraham to be a great name and blessing. We look back at part 1 of Genesis that God gave blessings to humanity in the beginning. Why? So that all families of the earth will be blessed through him. beginnings with blessings. God's rescue plan from rebellion will be through Abraham's family, later who would become the people of Israel, a great nation, so that people look up that one day wherein the prophets will say the fulfillment of the promise through Abraham's family. Israel will be the kingdom of priests in Mount Sinai. Part 2 of Genesis is then focused on Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 2 sons of Abraham, and Jacob's 12 sons. The first generations of Abraham's family are marked by repeated failures. However, God remains faithful and keeps His promise to bless them and other nations through them, despite their failures. Let's look at Abraham's story in chapter 12 to 25. God promised him a big family, but Abraham fears for his life because other men are attracted to Sarah, his wife. So then he denies that he is married to her. Another is that they can't have a child. So Sarah arranges for Abraham to sleep with a servant, Hagar, that creates more problems. But God still rescues and redeems Abraham. He even calls him and gives him a commitment in Genesis 15:17, a covenant with God, and he tells Abraham to look at the sky and see the numerous stars, because that's how many he can count his descendants will be. Abraham trusted God on his promises despite having no child. God's covenant promise is that Abraham will become father of many nations. God's blessings to everyone. Let's go to Genesis 25:35, the Jacob story. His name Jacob means deceiver, tricks his blind father Isaac into giving him the blessings and inheritance that's supposed to be his older brother Esau. Jacob then takes off. In Genesis 29:31, Jacob took on 4 wives, and although it was Rachel whom he loved the most, this created rivalries in families. The only thing that humbles Jacob is when his uncle Laban cheats him out of years of life. Genesis 32, the humble Jacob returns to his hometown. Jacob again wrestled with God for once blessing, and then God named him Israel, which means wrestles with God. God honored his determination. Genesis 37-50, the sons of Jacob. The favorite one is Joseph. The others become so jealous and plotted to kill him. However, they just decided to sell him to slavery in Egypt when he ended up in prison. In Genesis 41-46, God's favor was with Joseph and elevates him as second in command for the Pharaoh. Joseph saves Egypt from famine and his brothers. The sin of Abraham's family is met with God's faithfulness. Towards the end of the book, Joseph says, "You planned this for evil, but God planned it for good and to save many lives." Remember, the wounded victor will crush the snake's head and defeat evil. This promise is connected directly into Abraham's family line. This is a part on how he will bring blessings to the nation. The promises of God for the nation of Israel continues, and we will see more of his faithfulness as we flip through the pages of what is called the Bible.